Hi, my name is Dr. Sheldon Horowitz here at the National Center for Learning Disabilities. Thank you for joining for the next of our Ask the Expert series. What I'd like to do today is provide an overview of Asperger syndrome and nonverbal learning disabilities and do a bit of a comparison, since those two terms and these two conditions are very often confused and in fact share many characteristics in common. So let's begin with a little bit of a refresher about Asperger syndrome and nonverbal learning disabilities. And for a deeper dive, a closer look at each of these, please be sure to look at and to view other videos in this series. Asperger syndrome, when we think about Asperger syndrome, we think about individuals who have very strong visual, spatial thinking and learning abilities. These are individuals who often are very attentive to detail, they have strong vocabularies, they have speech-language development that's somewhat robust. They often exhibit very intense and narrow focus on particular types of objects or subjects, topics, and we do see in Asperger syndrome individuals some repetitive behaviors. Different from Asperger syndrome, let's look at nonverbal learning disabilities, and in those individuals, different from the visual thinking strengths that those with Asperger's have, these are individuals who have very strong auditory skills. They're good auditory listeners, good auditory thinkers and learners. A little bit confusing because the title says nonverbal learning disabilities when in fact that's their area of strength. The verbal area is in fact where they often have some of their strongest skills. These are individuals who in the auditory domain, in the listening domain, have very good attentional skills. They're able to concentrate for long periods of time. They have good receptive or listening vocabularies, and they have very good auditory memory skills, listening skills. Often these individuals with nonverbal learning disabilities are very strong in reading and often in spelling as well. It's in the areas of written expression and often in the handwriting, the actual act of writing, and also in the areas of math where they struggle. Individuals with nonverbal learning disabilities, like those with Asperger's, often pay attention to detail, but not so much as a fascination or a preoccupation. And these individuals with nonverbal LD rarely exhibit the kinds of rituals that we associate with other kinds of disorders. They have some functional routines, things that they do to help them along to do things, but they often do not exhibit what we refer to as non-functional routines. So here are some of the differences between Asperger's and nonverbal learning disabilities as two different types of disorder, but what are some of the shared characteristics? And here's why there's often confusion about these two disorders, and they're sometimes thought about interchangeably. Both individuals with Asperger's and nonverbal learning disabilities often struggle in the area of eye contact. They're sometimes and often literal thinkers. They don't read between the lines. They miss innuendo in the ways that things are communicated to them. They struggle with social reciprocity, the give and take in social situations that makes for conversation and a relaxed social rapport. They're at risk for anxiety and depression more so than many other kinds of individuals who have learning and behavioral issues. There is some motor skill delay, and even if there's catch-up, very often individuals with Asperger's and nonverbal learning disabilities will maintain a sense of motor awkwardness about them. Both of these types of individuals often have difficulty understanding social cues and reading body language. They may and often do struggle with changes in routine and have difficulties during periods of transition. They often struggle with spatial relationships, sort of figuring out where they're supposed to go, to the left, to the right, how far is it, how long does it take. Their empathy and their social judgment can be areas of concern. Because of some of these language and social kinds of issues, some of these eye contact issues, some of the social reciprocity issues, it's often hard for them to establish and maintain productive peer relationships. And another aspect of that peer interaction is impacted by difficulties that they have in shared enjoyment or interest in others. Often what they'll talk about is something that they're very much focused on, but it's hard for them to read whether the person who they're talking to is similarly interested in what they're interested at the same time. When we think about Asperger syndrome and nonverbal learning disabilities, as you were listening and as you're looking at some of these features, I'm sure that some of what we understand and some of what you might also associate with individuals with learning disabilities and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder seem similar. So in fact, are there features of LD that overlap with features of Asperger's syndrome and nonverbal learning disabilities? The answer is yes. In some individuals, in fact, there is some overlap of feature. There are some shared characteristics. But learning disabilities are not characterized by these kinds of disorders or these kinds of features, nor are learning disabilities typified by these kinds of things that we see most frequently in the nonverbal learning disability domain. For more information about these types of disorders and learning disabilities and other disorders of attention and behavior, please be sure to visit the ld.org website.